The sound of the tire giving up came like a soft scream in the middle of an ordinary day, and in that instant, 3 lives quietly tilted toward each other without knowing it yet. The sun was high, traffic hummed, and the world was busy pretending nothing extraordinary ever happened on a Tuesday afternoon, but on the edge of a service road outside a tired strip of shops, fate slowed down just long enough to change everything. What began as a flat tire and a crying teenager would ripple into something far bigger than kindness, bigger than money, and bigger than grief, because sometimes the smallest human decency can shake the tallest towers built of steel and silence. If you believe in kindness, second chances, and the power of ordinary people doing the right thing when no one is watching, please take a moment right now to like, comment, share, and subscribe to the channel Kindness Matters. Your support keeps stories like this alive and reminds the world that compassion still exists. Rowan Hale had learned to measure time differently since becoming a single father. Days were no longer divided by clocks or calendars but by school drop-offs, grease-stained afternoons, and evenings that ended with homework spread across a kitchen table that still carried the faint echo of a woman's laughter long gone. His mechanic shop sat on the edge of town where new pavement gave way to cracked asphalt, a place most people drove past without noticing unless their car betrayed them. Rowan noticed everything. He noticed the way engines cried before they died, the way people looked when money was tight, and the way his son Theo's shoulders relaxed when Rowan showed up, no matter how tired he was. Daylight ruled his world now, from the first wrench turned under the bright hum of shop lights to the last sunbeam fading through the garage door before he locked up. That afternoon, Rowan had grease on his hands and a quiet ache in his chest that never fully went away. It was the kind of ache that came from remembering someone who used to stand beside him in the daylight, teasing him about working too hard and loving him anyway. He wiped his hands, stepped outside for air, and that was when he saw the car pulled awkwardly onto the shoulder, hazard lights blinking like a nervous heartbeat. A teenage girl stood beside it, phone pressed uselessly to her ear, tears streaking her face as if the day had finally overwhelmed her. Cars rushed past without slowing, sunlight glinting off windshields, the world too busy to notice one scared kid stranded in plain sight. Rowan did not think about it for long. He rarely did when it came to helping. He crossed the road with the steady gait of a man who had learned to carry responsibility without complaint. The girl was shaking, her expensive shoes dusty from pacing, her backpack slung awkwardly as though it weighed more than books. The car itself was a luxury model, sleek and polished, entirely out of place next to Rowan's worn boots and oil-stained shirt. Yet fear has no price tag, and tears look the same no matter where they fall from. He took one look at the tire, flattened completely against the pavement, and understood the problem immediately. The spare was untouched, pristine, as though the trunk had never been opened before. The girl's distress deepened as Rowan worked silently, loosening bolts, positioning the jack, moving with the calm efficiency of someone who had done this 1,000 times. The sun beat down, bright and unapologetic, and Rowan felt the familiar pull between staying on schedule and staying human. He chose the latter without hesitation. The girl's story spilled out in fragments without ever becoming formal conversation, carried by sobs and apologies and the kind of embarrassment teenagers feel when the world catches them unprepared. She had been driving herself home from school, late because of an exam, afraid because her phone had no signal, terrified because her mother was unreachable and always busy. Rowan listened without interrupting, letting her fear drain into the air as he tightened the last bolt. He handed her a bottle of water from his shop fridge, watched her hands steady as she drank, and reminded her through gentle gestures and calm presence that this moment, like all moments, would pass. When the tire was secure and the car safe to drive, Rowan waved away her attempts to pay. He had never been good at taking money for things that felt like basic decency. The girl looked at him with a mix of gratitude and disbelief, as though she had expected the world to be colder than this. She climbed back into her car, wiped her face, and drove away under the open sky, leaving Rowan standing there with grease on his hands and a strange heaviness in his chest he could not name. Rowan returned to his shop, finished his work, and picked up Theo from school as the day slid gently toward evening. Life resumed its familiar rhythm. Dinner was simple. Homework was supervised. Laughter surfaced unexpectedly during a shared joke, and Rowan felt the quiet pride of having made it through another day. He did not expect anything to come of the afternoon. Kindness, to him, was not a transaction. It was just how he survived. The next morning began like any other, full daylight pouring through the shop windows as Rowan lifted the garage door and inhaled the comforting scent of oil and metal. He had barely finished his first cup of coffee when the phone rang. The number was unfamiliar, the kind usually ignored, but something compelled him to answer. On the other end was a voice composed yet strained, controlled yet carrying an undercurrent of urgency. The woman introduced herself as Celeste Vaughn, a name Rowan did not immediately recognize until the weight of it settled in. She was known in business magazines, whispered in financial circles, and admired from a distance as one of the wealthiest women in the region, perhaps the country. She was also, as it turned out, the mother of the crying teenager from the day before. Celeste had spent the night replaying the story her daughter Arya had told her through tears and relief, a story that cut through layers of privilege and protection she had built around her family. Arya had never been alone like that before, never truly scared without an assistant, a driver, or security within reach. The experience had shaken her, but what stayed with her most was the man who had helped without asking who she was or what she could offer in return. Celeste wanted to see that man for herself. Rowan listened as the explanation unfolded, his discomfort growing with every word that painted him as something extraordinary. He had only done what anyone should, he insisted inwardly, yet Celeste's gratitude was heavy, almost desperate. She asked if she could come by the shop that morning. Rowan agreed, unsure why his chest felt tight. The black car that arrived later that morning did not fit the street. It glided into the lot, reflective and silent, a symbol of a world Rowan had never touched. Celeste stepped out in tailored simplicity, her presence commanding without arrogance, her eyes sharp with intelligence and softened by concern. Daylight revealed the lines of stress she carried, the kind etched by responsibility and loss. She looked around the shop, at the modest tools, the worn floor, the framed drawing taped to the wall that clearly belonged to a child. Something in her expression shifted. Celeste listened as Rowan recounted the incident plainly, leaving out his own fear of seeing a young person in distress, leaving out the echo of his late wife's voice urging him to be kind. She watched his hands as he spoke, hands that fixed engines and held children and had chosen decency when no reward was promised. When he finished, she took a breath that seemed to release years of tension. Celeste's life had been built on control. She controlled markets, outcomes, narratives. She believed safety could be purchased and risk minimized. Yet her daughter's tears had exposed the illusion. Money had not saved Arya that afternoon. A stranger had. And that truth unsettled her more than any market crash ever had. She offered Rowan money, an amount that would have erased his debts, secured Theo's future, and changed his life overnight. Rowan declined without drama. He explained, gently and firmly, that kindness did not require compensation and that accepting such a sum would make the moment something it was never meant to be. Celeste stared at him as though he were speaking a foreign language, then slowly, something like respect took root. What Celeste did not say aloud was how deeply this encounter stirred her own unresolved grief. Years earlier, she had lost her husband to an accident that no amount of money could undo. Since then, she had armored herself and her daughter with resources, believing love could be expressed through protection and provision alone. Rowan, with his quiet strength and unremarkable heroism, challenged that belief simply by existing. Over the following weeks, daylight continued to bring Celeste back to the shop, sometimes with Arya, sometimes alone. There were no grand announcements, no cameras, no public gestures. She observed Rowan's world quietly, watching how he interacted with customers who struggled to pay, how he never rushed the elderly man who told the same story every visit, how Theo did his homework on a stool in the corner, absorbing the values of the place. Arya began to change too, volunteering to help around the shop, asking questions, learning what it meant to be capable instead of insulated. Rowan struggled with the growing presence of this other world in his life. He worried about imbalance, about expectations, about exposing Theo to something that could vanish as quickly as it appeared. Yet he could not deny the good that came with it. Celeste arranged for new equipment at the shop under the guise of business investment, making it clear she expected nothing in return. She funded a local scholarship program in Rowan's late wife's name after learning about her passion for education, honoring a woman she had never met but now felt connected to. Suspense crept in quietly as Rowan faced a decision he had avoided for years. His shop was failing, slowly but surely, crushed by rising costs and competition from corporate chains. Celeste saw the numbers without judgment and offered a partnership that would keep the shop independent while securing its future. Accepting meant trust, vulnerability, and stepping into a world Rowan had always stayed adjacent to but never entered. Daylight after daylight, Rowan wrestled with pride and fear, with the voice of his past and the needs of his present. He thought of Theo's future, of the long hours and missed moments, of the chance to build something sustainable without sacrificing his values. In the end, it was Theo who unknowingly tipped the balance, proudly telling a customer that his dad fixed things because he cared, not because he wanted to be rich. Rowan realized then that accepting help did not erase his kindness. It expanded it. The partnership went through quietly. The shop remained Rowan's in spirit and name, but its reach grew. He hired apprentices from the neighborhood, teaching them not just mechanics but responsibility and empathy. Celeste remained in the background, honoring Rowan's boundaries, learning from his world as much as he cautiously learned from hers. Arya thrived, grounded by experience, choosing to study social work instead of finance, driven by the memory of that day in the sun when she had been seen as a person instead of a project. As months passed, Rowan found himself healing in ways he had not expected. The ache in his chest softened. He allowed himself to imagine a future that was not defined solely by survival. He honored his late wife by living fully, by letting others in without fear of loss controlling him. Celeste, too, found something she had been missing, a reminder that legacy was not measured in billions but in lives touched quietly and sincerely. The story never made headlines. There was no viral moment, no public spectacle. It lived instead in the daily rhythm of a shop filled with light, in a teenager who learned courage through vulnerability, in a billionaire who rediscovered humility, and in a single father who proved that decency could still change the course of a life. If this story has touched your heart, if it reminded you that kindness still matters even in a world obsessed with speed and profit, please take a moment now to like, share, and engage with this video. Your support helps spread these stories further than you may realize. Before we end, we have one special request for you. Please comment below and tell us what kindness means to you, or share a moment when someone's small act changed your life in a big way. Because somewhere, in the middle of an ordinary day, someone is crying beside a broken-down car, and someone else is choosing whether to stop.